You're listening to A Life Creative, real conversations with artists, designers, and other creatives about how they build, sustain, and evolve their careers. In this episode, we talk with Rob Van Wyen and Kevin Seitz, the team behind the furniture brand Seitz. Drawing on Kevin's Swiss heritage, his industrial design training, and Rob's digital expertise and graphic design experience, they built a brand rooted in craftsmanship and intentional design. We discuss how their complementary skills shape their company, why they paused to focus on the operational side, and how they're approaching their relaunch while continuing to work full-time. The conversation also covers their upcoming Monocle residency, working with Swiss makers, and their commitment to creating heritage designs in a culture that often favors disposable.
So Marcy, I met Rob and Kevin through you, actually.
Yeah, I worked with Rob was at Martha for a while, and he was working on it was right at the launch when everyone was doing an iPad edition of their magazines, and Rob was hired to work on the iPad edition. And we ended up working on a really tight project. We had to develop an egg app together. It was just the two of us with a really short time frame, so I got to know him really well. And he's just incredibly smart, incredibly talented, and he knows the digital, the like nuts and bolts of things, and also the beauty of the design part. So he has a really nice skill set and so I'm excited to talk to him about this project he's been working on with his partner, doing beautiful furniture.
Yeah, and I met him through you. You came to Europe to visit me when I was living there, and I really enjoyed his company, and I'm really happy that I got to know him a little bit better and to know that he started this furniture company, and I'm excited to hear the story.
No, it's a great story. Hi guys, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to have this conversation.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're excited to be here.
Welcome.
So we wanted to start off, do a little bit of your background and then get into your business. So Kevin, you grew up in Switzerland before moving to the US. Do you feel like that influenced you in terms of like getting into design and creative things, and kind of how did that kind of manifest itself for you?
First of all, I grew up also being born in Spain and living in England before coming to the US. I think that definitely influenced how I entered design because I think everyone in my family is very hands-on. And so growing up, my family was always making things on their own. So I think it was a natural sort of progression into design.
Got it. And did you see that as creativity or practicality?
I think initially it was practicality because my parents worked my dad was like an aircraft engineer and my mom was a flight attendant. So the arts wasn't necessarily something that was a career focus. It was more of like a hobby that I thought I really enjoyed. And to be honest, I'm not a great writer and I couldn't imagine myself sitting in a classroom or doing a normal clerical job. So the arts was something that I wanted to pursue.
So sort of the mother of invention kind of thing, right? Where it's like you need something and your family is the type that I can do that kind of attitude.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of, like in Swiss culture, there's a lot of self-reliance where you just sort of do it because no one else is going to do it for you. So I think growing up, like we always had that innate sort of drive, I guess.
Okay.
And Rob, you got into web development at a young age, and what pulled you into that world early on, and how did it sort of shape your creative instincts? I know that's three questions all in consecutively.
My family was very behind the times with technology. I mean, we didn't have a computer. My brother and I, all we did was draw and play soccer. And when I was in 8th grade, I broke my ankle pretty severely playing soccer. And I was like off my feet for over a year, I had surgery, all this stuff. And so I couldn't play soccer. I could still draw, but I think somehow I bought myself a computer and I taught myself how to do web development. And that pretty much got me into design, oddly enough, where I was a really annoying child and I harassed the Major League Soccer team of New York at the time. It was the Metro Stars, and I don't know, I must have bugged the webmaster over and over, and she was like, fine, fine. And I took over their marketing from 8th grade through college. And so that was my first sort of like entry into design on accident.
So you basically just taught yourself.
Yes. On the digital side, yeah, because I think, once I went to college, at that point, digital product design didn't exist and they didn't teach web design. It was more traditional, typography, graphic design. So I just I'm inherently curious, and so I think I wanted to understand how things were built and all this. So I just taught myself that on the side.
And then you ended up studying graphic design in college
Yeah, I
because
studied.
because of that
Yeah.
whole idea of like trying to kind of round out the whole web experience type thing. Is that
Yeah, I mean, similar to Kevin's parents, my parents were the same, and I think, they wanted me to have a stable job. So initially I went to New Paltz to study art education because that's what my brother did, and
right?
To be a
my
teacher?
my yeah, my parents are very, my dad was a detective, and my brother went to school to be a teacher. So like we're in that public service, and so they thought that was the safe space, and they thought that, anything with marketing, that's the first thing to go. But yeah, I think, I'm a stubborn child or human. So when I went to college, I think I knew that I wanted to do design, and I just sort of kept that to myself, and then yeah, it just happened.
And then Kevin, you were also industrial design.
Well, he was industrial. Kevin was graph. I mean, Rob was graphic.
Yeah,
Robert's graphics, and then okay.
but it usually gets confused because for Rob's career path too, it's like certain jobs that he's done have been product design, which is also something that is industrial design too sometimes, so it can be quite confusing.
Well, because
But you
that
had
was the thing that for me as an industrial designer, I all of a sudden like when you see job listings that say product design, I'm like,
Yeah.
designing a website to me is not product design.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
but you also had a minor, Kevin, right?
I didn't have a minor. I have another degree in
Like a
international
double major.
relations.
Smarty
Yeah.
pants.
So that was the only reason I could go to art school was I needed to have a backup plan. Because when I told my mom that I wanted to go to art school, she cried. That was like her first reaction.
Usually we
With
cry after we
joy.
graduate. So what did you take? What was the double? Was it
So I
international?
did product design and global studies, but I feel like those are really random and obscure like names. But basically industrial design and international relations.
And when did it start veering towards industrial design? In school or after school?
Yeah, I mean, even before school, like I had no interest.
Before my first class.
Yeah, but it was interesting in the sense that it really pushed me to think about things in like a larger global context. And it was a lot of like reading and it critical thinking that I can apply to industrial design.
Rob, you started out at Condé Nast during the rise of the digital age, I suppose. How did your background in digital help you through that time? It was really the beginning of it all.
Yeah. I mean, I think the timing was great for me. I mean, because again, like I said, at that time in university, no school was really teaching, at least with the design side, anything about that because it was just all so new. And so because I did that on my own, it really helped me, I mean, get jobs, to be honest. I think also after Conde, when I worked at Martha, I know that that's what helped me get that job because, you know, in the editorial magazine world, technology was still new and everyone was nervous. Is this going to kill editorial? Is it going to kill print? And so I was lucky enough where I could be this bridge between editorial and design and technology, and that's something that to this day I get excited about of working with different minds and what they think they need and how to interpret that and come up with like better solutions. So yeah, when I started at Conde, the iPhone came out, and we did one of the 10 first apps on the App Store. It was very simple. It was for style.com, and it was really just a slideshow of like of the runway. But at the time, it was like, you had music on your phone and these apps, and so it was really exciting. And then it quickly changed. Then the iPad came out, and so the beginning of my career was all about like apps on the App Store, and I went to Cupertino and I got to go to the Worldwide Developer Conference, and I got to see Steve Jobs' last, presentation, which was really special. But yeah, it was such a interesting time of how technology really changed our industry so quickly.
Yeah, especially I remember it was probably one of the first teams that shot a digital photography, and it was challenging. We were all of a sudden everything was faster, you know,
Yeah.
no Polaroids and just shot after shot after shot, and it really is like you said, industry changing for magazines, good and bad, both,
Yeah.
as far as photography is concerned, but since then it's sort of developed where it's become the standard.
First job for you, you kind of mentioned Rob Condé Nast, and then you mentioned working at Martha, which is where I met you. And then
Hmm.
kind of not at the same time, but I ironically or whatever, Kevin also worked at Martha at different times. Do you want to talk a little bit about your first jobs, Kevin, and like how that
Sure.
started?
Yeah.
Did you
So
know each other at Martha?
no, we worked, I think there was what, 3 years or so where we didn't like
Okay.
Rob had left. I had entered Martha like a long period after Martha had gotten sold. So I think it was just a different business entirely when by the time I showed up.
And what were you working on there?
So I was doing the home tabletop stuff. So designing all the plates, the dinnerware, the glasses. I don't know if we did flatware. And then there was also some kitchen prep items, cutting boards, knives,
Hmm.
things like that. So in that realm.
So both of you have this understanding of how things are built, Rob, digitally, you product wise. That's a total advantage of what you do today. And we're going to preface this because the business that you have today, all those things that you've done in the past seem like it just enhanced what you started. How did you come about to want to do what you're doing today and explain what you're doing, because you're both working at the same time? Like a lot of people, Marcy is the same. She did ceramics while she had a full-time job, and you guys were doing the same thing, and I think that's a really valuable story. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I think probably it initially started while working at Martha for me. I mean, I bought my first apartment while I was at Martha Stewart, and just being in that environment, first of all, was so inspiring. I mean, I was there a very short time, but I think I learned so much there from everyone I worked with, including Marcy, and it really just, the home and like the importance of home really became such an important thing there. And so, having bought my first apartment, it's like you start to furnish it. And I think I've always really liked interiors. I just didn't realize it. When I was a child, I was saying this to my dad the other day. I feel bad. I would drag furniture all around my room. I would hang posters up with thumbtacks and then move it a week later. And I destroyed their house, moving things around. But I think having your own space was sort of what started it. And once Kevin and I, moved in together into that space, I think it's when we first started thinking about that together and what it looks like. And, and him having a degree in industrial design, and we were trying to find furniture, and like it wasn't either functional, or it was nice looking, but it would break easily. Like he was the one that started kind of yelling at me like, hey, why don't you just let me design something or make something?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a natural sort of progression. Like I would come back from work and I would design things for fun and ask for Rob's input. And when I met Rob, he had just moved into this apartment and he was like he said he was furnishing things, and I kept noticing some of the quality of the things that he was buying wasn't that great, and it wasn't always 100% what he wanted. Like, oh, he liked the look of something but it was way too big for his apartment. So there are always these like little things that bugged him. And it's like design is solution oriented, right? You can change something if you can plan for it, and so I was naturally doing that. And then I think the real push for us to get started into doing the furniture was when Rob first came to Switzerland, because I kept telling him like, "Oh, we can have things made custom in Switzerland. Like I know people from my family, like my family's been in the same town forever, and you know, they've known people that are carpenters, for instance, and they've made things for my family in the past. So that was something that seemed like a no-brainer to me, and I think that excited Rob and interested him, and I feel like he can share more about his experience to Switzerland.
Well, the one thing, one aspect of this sort of collaboration is that you guys are a couple and you work
Hmm.
together. You know, did you both have the same design sense when you first met? Or, you know, you were saying that you were helping Rob with some decisions of things, but in general, you know, you have the same design sort of sense.
Yeah, I think so. I think we grew up with quite similar backgrounds. Like our parents are both sort of working class people. So I think there were a lot of traits that were similar that were instilled. For instance, like buying things that are gonna last because you're gonna buy something once, for instance. Like I think those things like we're quite different in where we grew up and the things that we do, but in terms of like the upbringing, it's actually quite similar.
Even when I bought my first apartment, I don't think I really knew what my style or aesthetic was. I mean, I was so young, and it's always evolving, I know, but I think that's, when we met too, we were kind of discovering that together, which I think was helpful.
Yeah.
And especially now, since that apartment we sold it, and now we're in Williamsburg, and our space we've been renovating for a very long time together to be our studio space as well. And I think that's been very healthy, because when someone moves into your space, it's like it feels weird. And so we were doing this together, and we've been
Here
able
you're,
to.
here's your part of the closet. Here's your
Yeah,
three hangers.
exactly.
Maybe not the drywall though, right?
Yeah, yeah, maybe not the drywall. But now we've made those decisions together, and sometimes I think I know something that I want, but then when, Kevin, he always knows about something obscure, which is something I love about him, and everything in music and art and stuff. And so he'll he'll uncover something for me and be like, oh, that's really cool. Like, let's see how that looks. And I think especially during the pandemic, when we were home all of the time together, I think that working together became even more of a bond for us from my point of view. I think, a lot of friends of ours are like, oh, I could never work with my partner. And for us, it just seems so easy. Like, we want to spend time together because we do very different things. I get inspired by that. Like, I wish I could be an industrial designer. I never will be. I have too much on my plate and my brain to even do that. But I think because I have so much appreciation for that, we teach each other, and I think we balance ourselves out. So this journey together, not only in a business, but I think of what our shared aesthetic is, and how we're creating that together, has been really fun.
What's
I,
kind of
I think
interesting as
that
someone who knows both of you guys is like you have a shared aesthetic, but you also have complementary skill sets that kind of help each other.
Mm,
So you both have your roles, and I think you kind of meet in the middle with a lot of stuff
yeah.
in that way.
Yeah, I
So
think that definitely helps
yeah,
because sometimes when you talk to other couples that are working together, they tend to be like they're both graphic designers, for
right.
instance, or they're
Yeah.
both industrial designers. And I feel like in that sense, there probably is a lot more like headbutting. Whereas if someone is somewhat adjacent, then
Yeah.
you're able to cover more
Well, you
ground.
can
yeah.
meet in the middle and talk about what you need to do, and then you both have to do something separate, not both do the
Yeah.
same
Exactly.
thing and rework it differently. So, Kevin, when you mentioned initially, you said when Rob first came to Switzerland, that was kind of like an impact moment. And then you guys decided once you went there that that's where you wanted to make everything. Can you kind of talk a little bit about like the inspiration of that and the story and why of that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the part of Switzerland that I'm from is this very rural, industrial sort of area. And my grandparents lived in like a farmhouse that was, it's over 150 years old at this point. And there's always been something that drew me to this sort of alpine aesthetic, just in terms of like cleanliness, clean lines, simplicity, great construction, utility. And for me, this is something that's always been second nature. So I think for Rob, it was definitely an eye-opening experience of seeing it from like a different perspective and also getting a better understanding of where I come from and my sort of thinking, because it's very easy to see it in that bigger context of everything together. And I feel like Rob can definitely talk about his experience too with that.
In my career, when I started in editorial and then I made a shift of going to commerce, my first intro to that was at West Elm. And I think that was at a time when a lot of companies were realizing that they couldn't just sell things. They had to have more stories behind it and editorial so that people could, if they bought a table and they had people over, they had a talking point, right? Like, I bought this table from this place and these artisans made it. And a lot of it in places where maybe manufactured, like, I mean, I still see that today. I've worked at a lot of startups where everything's about growth marketing and having these stories. And for me, there was a lot of fatigue in dealing with that, of having these fake stories just to get someone to click on something. And so when I went to Switzerland and I met Kevin's family of a million people, and they all worked in the trades, which was really maybe not unique there, but in the States, it's not something you see as often. And so it's funny, like, every time one of his cousins, they're at the age of they're buying homes, and then so the whole family comes over, and one cousin does the electrical work, the other one does the floors, the other one builds out the kitchen, and you see this sense of community and humanity, where as I've gotten older in the States, and everything just feels so manufactured, and you're just cut off from humans. There was something very novel to me about that, where it felt, in Switzerland too, it's, you just feel like you're transported to another world, and being an American, maybe that was just so like wild for me. I mean, I've traveled a lot, but there's just so something unique about how people think there. And I guess just observing that during my time there and seeing, all these trades in his little tiny town. Like, there's the barrel maker, there's the ladder maker, like these very specific trades, and they've been doing it for, generations. And I just thought, wow, this is what a lot of these companies are looking for, these stories, and how it's passed down from generations. And then just the setting of it all in the Alps is just, you go to any town and it's breathtaking. So I think that's, coming back from that trip, I was thinking a lot in my head, and then I think we talked about it, and it just happened. I don't know if there was really like we didn't have like a sitting down, we're like, okay, we're gonna do this. It just started happening, and we kept having fun, like exploring and developing, and that just sort of took off from there.
So do you feel like it was conversations with different people that kind of spurred you to go back and design things so you could work with them? Did it work that way, or was it kind of like a little bit of finding people? How did that process of like inspiration to actually designing stuff and like having
So
those conversations happen?
yeah, what happened was when I moved into Rob's place, he was looking for a very specific piece of seating. Like, he wanted a bench for his apartment, and I was like, you know what, I should design this, because he kept looking for things and either it was too expensive, it was too long, he didn't like the color or the finish. And I told him, I was like, I can design something exactly how you want, and I can help with a bit of the aesthetic because I have an idea. And then that really pushed us to create our first item. And then naturally, when we did that, went through that process, Rob was like, I think we can create like a larger collection around this and this idea. And think that's how it sort of started. And at that point too, like, I had been let go from one of my jobs and I was looking for work, and it wasn't happening immediately, but I was still working on the furniture and developing these other ideas. And Rob was like, oh, we can take this and make it into like a larger thing if you're interested. And I think I was always really nervous because I didn't understand like the larger picture. And I think that's where a lot of Rob's experience comes in, because he's dealt with the lifestyle, the marketing, and also the image making around that.
Rob, you touched on this subject, which I think is very relevant today, and it's sort of this shift or broader shift to less disposable furniture. And you talked about that. And Kevin, you spoke about how your family keeps furniture for generations, and I know that's an influence to it. But Rob, tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, like Kevin said earlier, we were brought up very similarly, our parents being the working class. And my dad lived on the same street his entire life. It's my tiny town. It's a hamlet. It's not even a village, and Sable, and it was all Dutch people, Dutch people, Dutch people, like van this, van that. And my dad, when he married my mom, he was going to move away, and my great grandfather was like, "You're not allowed to leave Sable," and he gave them a plot of land, and my dad built a house, and they've been there ever since. And every piece of furniture that was in there the day they bought it, or they built it, is still there. And so I think that's just been instilled in both of our lives of, investment, not only in the things, but like the people around you. And so I think that's just always been a part of our DNA. And, living in New York, when we were telling you, we walk our dog every morning, and you see every time someone moves, the corner of the street is just littered with furniture. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just, hey, we're moving. Let's throw this out. Let's get
Yeah.
the new stuff. And it's not all cheaply made furniture. Some of it's really nice, but it really makes me sad. I've been now taking photos every time, just to like document it myself, or remind me. But I think that's something we've been thinking a lot about. And again, going back to Switzerland too, I think there's just part of that DNA where now it's seen as a very rich country, but not too long ago it was the exact opposite. And I think what's appealing for me, and probably a part of it is because of the mountains, they're just very cut off from the rest of the world. And so back in the day, they had to work with what they had, which was very little material. And so they were very innovative of, we don't have nails or screws. How do we make furniture? Just joinery. And there's just something about going back to the necessity, like, we need this. This is all we have to do, and how much innovation can come out of with those constraints. I think that's always been appealing for me in my own career too, right? Of, you get a brief and you have to design something, and when you have so many constraints, I think you can be a lot more creative versus you can do anything in the world, and sometimes that's very daunting. Just with the environment and everything happening, and there's fast fashion, fast furniture, it's definitely something that we don't want to be a part of. And so we're also not mass manufacturing our furniture. Most of it's made to order, and we're not just creating a piece then to sit, in the store or in the stock room. We want to make sure that people who are purchasing are in the same ethos as we are.
Yeah. And Kevin, you were saying that some of the pieces of furniture in your own family have been generations in their home, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff, as Rob was sort of sharing earlier about my family coming together, we have storerooms of things. It kind of looks like a bit of a hoarder's den, but whenever someone moved out or got a new home and they needed something, someone would be like, "Oh, I have a set of plates that you can take," or
Right.
"I have an armoire that you can have." And so these things just naturally get passed down. And I think because the quality of the item is so good,
Yeah.
it's able to last. And part of that also has to do with because they didn't have a lot of money. So if they were going to buy something, it needed to last. And my parents also don't like throwing things away, probably because of that same reason too. It's
Yeah.
like we hold on to literally everything, and it drives Rob crazy. But
I
whenever he
think
needs a plastic bag, I always have one.
I think I think the aesthetic aspect of your family having a taste level is good, because I'm not taking those Hummels.
I think you guys both had these complementary skill sets, and kept working on these projects in Switzerland and building an assortment, and then you kind of realized you were missing a large piece of it, which was like the business side of it, because you had some like response and people were interested, but you kind of weren't quite sure how to do that. Can you talk a little bit about how that whole came about? Because you're almost in a way relaunching yourselves to kind of once you got things more buttoned up. And I think that's a really important lesson, I think, for people, is like, you can do all these things, you can make these beautiful things, and then you can tell that amazing story, but you really felt like you couldn't get it out into the world in the way you wanted to, and you needed more help with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we learned very quickly. We we originally launched in 2019 at ICFF. So that's the International Contemporary Furniture Fair held in New York, and it used to be like this huge deal. When we were younger, we would go together and see all these new designers, and we launched, and then the pandemic happened, which I don't need to explain what happened there, but
A
um, you
nightmare.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, not great timing. But I think, the one thing I learned is that, when we launched, we were lucky even before we launched. Monocle magazine put our bench that Kevin was describing earlier in their global issue of like the best designs. So that was such a huge honor for us
How
because
did they find out about it?
well, what's funny is in most of Europe, in magazines, you can contact the editors. So
A lot
I
easier
opened up,
than, yeah.
yeah, I opened up Monocle because we're subscribers, and I looked at the design editor who was Nolan at the time, and his email address is right there. So I was like, I'll email him. He'll never respond. And I think within a day he responded and was like, "Wow, guys, this collection's beautiful. We're working on the design issue right now. If you can send a bench to us in London, we'll shoot it for you."
Were
And
you suspect? No. You were like, oh my God, I'm gonna ship a bench to this guy. I'm not gonna hear from him again. Or was it sort of
well,
like,
yeah, we were confused
Yeah,
mostly.
confused would be
You include a return
the
label?
better
Yeah,
response.
right.
right?
Because I think too, like when you're in any sort of creative field and you've been working on something, I mean, we had been planning this for almost a year, I would say. And then when someone says they like it, you always get sort of thrown because you're not sure. You're like, oh, I like it. Do other people like it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you guys have discussed this plenty of times that you're putting yourself out there and it's always scary, right? Like,
Terrifying.
and you don't
On who
know,
to
like,
trust too,
there's,
right?
do you just put it out? Is it, yeah. And, you're so attached. Is this perfect yet? And, you don't know and you release it. But I think it was like weird, but like, okay, cool. So we did that. But honestly, it helped really give a name for us because instantly, as soon as the issue came out, and it timed well, like it came out right before ICFF, which was in May. We immediately got inquiries. We sold a lot of benches, but what happened was a lot of retailers or wholesalers were emailing us, "Hey, we want to carry your bench, your other things," and Kevin and I looked at each other like, "What? Like, what does that? What does what does
We
that
didn't tell you
mean?"
they're miniatures.
Yeah. And, I think from then until recently, we realized, we're designers first, which is great, but I started a web design business in eighth grade, but that's very different because it's just a service. And there was so much that we didn't know on the business side. And so I think that's what we've been learning of how to handle that. What does wholesale mean? How do you price things? And how do we recently moved our manufacturing to a different workshop that could handle larger volume, like all of these things that you wouldn't normally think about, right? Like we're worrying about
Yeah.
designing the piece, does it function? But actually, there's so much behind the scenes that you have to do. And we've been working on that probably now for 2 years almost. And it's so exhausting in a way, but also rewarding because we both like learning things. And it's like there's spreadsheets and stuff like that, which sounds boring, but it's actually really interesting. Like, I don't know, I have appreciation for it now of like, wow, we now feel prepared for when we relaunch. If someone comes to us, we have like the menu of like, this is what, if you need this, we have this option. And just thinking about landing fees from Switzerland and tariffs and all of these things that we have to think about, we've thought about. And so now we feel very prepared. So in a way, it was good that we launched, before the pandemic, and also people realized how important your home was during the pandemic. So
Yeah.
there is some positives that came out of that, but it's given us time to really get ourselves buttoned up.
And how did you guys get all that information?
So at my first job, my boss had hired a consultant to help with furniture. So he was mostly working in beer packaging and he wanted to get into the home and furniture space. And I think through his network, he had come across this furniture consultant, and I remembered his name. And I told Rob, because at one point we had a heart to heart, like, are we going to do this? We recognized that it was working, but it could work better. And we realized that the missing component was sort of the business aspect. And so I brought up to Rob that I remembered this guy's name, and we just reached out to him and we're like, hey, we need help with running a furniture business. This is something we've never done before.
So what kind of things did he help you with? I think part of it was like your assortment and all that sort of
I
stuff.
think just demystifying all of that, learning about margins, expectations from wholesalers, anticipating questions that they would have about packaging, about tariffs, about warehousing, like all these things that as a designer, you're so far removed because you're worried about, is this red too warm or too cold?
Yeah.
Yeah, but also assortment, like you said, Marcy. I mean, we looking back when we first launched, it was very random stuff, and I think the result of that was because again, we're problem solvers and it was things that we needed in our own space, which we realized like, oh, not everyone has our space. And so I think there is a little bit of just understanding the market and what people are buying, and not in a way to like we're gonna just follow trends. It was just more to understand, when people are furnishing a space, it's usually the kitchen and the dining and living area because that's where everyone spends their time. And previously we were designing nightstands for the bedroom, and that's maybe not the best thing because people are only spending limited time
Right.
there. So
Or
there
it's
was a
not
lot
the
of
best place to
interesting,
start because it's eventually you can
yeah,
get to those other places, but like a beginner, like look at
yeah.
what you have is
I read
probably
somewhere that the last thing that people actually buy is a headboard.
Mm.
Like they live
Hmm.
without a headboard for years and years and years because they just don't think they need one, and it's on the side. The gentleman that or the person that you hired, how did that? How is that sort of price to pay? Is it sort of like a contract, or is it a per project basis, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, so to demystify the man, but his name's Ben Gaffney, and he's really awesome. He's become a part of our like family, I'd say. And I think what's great is sometimes when you're working with people, it's really hard to trust, and us being like, well, we're family now. We know each other. And to bring a third into that, you're like, it's scary. But he's
It's a design throuple.
it's a
let's
design
keep it
throuple,
A
right?
design
keep it
thruple, if you
PG-13.
will.
Yes, yes. But it was great because, again, I think using your network, right? So because he had worked with Kevin's previous boss, and we saw how those results happened, and then in meeting with him too, what we liked is he was very transparent. We're very transparent about what we do and our business, and I think he was very transparent around like the workload this was going to be for us and how he can help. And so with that too, he, unlike a lot of people, was just felt real and authentic and was like, hey, like let's figure out like what's going to work for you. Is it like, do you want to have a 3-month contract, a year contract? And so he was very flexible with us in understanding where we wanted to take the business. He listened. A lot of times maybe you have someone who just comes in and they try to take over, and he has really just been there as a support system of, what are your goals? And I can give you the framework in order to reach those. And I think his whole goal there is that he doesn't want to feel like he has to be here for us forever. And he really wants to equip us, which is great. It's a dream scenario, right? Where sometimes you spend money on people or services and it falls flat. And I think for us, it's been probably our best investment in the business is bringing someone in who's done it before. He's worked with Design Within Reach and Herman Miller and Auto Copenhagen and a lot of really well-known design organizations, and has brought them success both in the business side, but even, sourcing and product development. So he's just a wealth of knowledge, and he's not afraid to share that. And so it's been really helpful for us, also to get a third party perspective, because we're so in it day to day, and he can kind of be the realistic, like, okay, well, you got to meet these numbers if you want to sell this. And so it's been amazing.
Well, I think that combination of art and commerce, and to actually know that, you know what, I don't know how to do this business aspect of it. I mean, we're not taught that in art school. There's very few. I
No.
mean, you probably, Kevin, you might have touched on it, being international relations, but I think that's an important lesson to know, that you have to get help in the areas that you're not strong in. And this gentleman, it seems like he's not only a consultant, but he's also a mentor. Like,
Yeah.
And he met you and said, these guys have something really good. And I think that's a high compliment in the idea that he wanted to work with you.
So you guys have some exciting things coming up, and we want to talk a little bit about that too. So you want to do a relaunch of what you have. You've been working with him, kind of buttoning everything up. So what's kind of in the works for the next few months?
Yeah, so after we've been developing products and also the business side with Ben, and so we've developed a 9-piece collection that's actually cohesive now. And that took a long time, and with Kevin leading that, and 3D printing stuff and back and forth, and working with our workshop in Switzerland and prototyping. But
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt you, but also I always thought it was interesting. You guys do a lot of 3D printing of miniatures to kind of figure out joints
yeah,
and things like that, which I think is really cool. And that's kind of coming to Kevin's skill set of understanding all of that from industrial design. Just a little, sorry, aside.
I want to
I
get one of
mean,
those miniatures.
it is really fun. I mean, it also doubles as a nightstand if you need
Oh,
the
I
extra
love
space.
Yeah, so they're not
yeah,
that small.
our chair holds an
They're not that
iPhone.
small, and they're also not that big. But also because our factory is in Switzerland, and we like honestly, sometimes it costs a bomb to fly there, and between work and planning and doing other stuff, 3D printing has been a great sort of intermediary between talking with the factory and the workshop, for instance, and then figuring out on our end like what is working from a aesthetic standpoint. And so we don't always have to run over there whenever we have a really small issue that we can just work through design wise.
yeah.
Yeah.
And like with scale, and we've printed things out on paper to scale, but it's still just it's very different. And so doing the miniatures, but then also we've printed full scale, like a piece of our dining table, the corner at scale, and then we like held it up to our current dining table, and like, does that feel weird? Does it feel good? And it's been really helpful for us to just do that. Like, you press print, we go out for the day, we come back, and then we have we have this.
Is it 1/16 scale? Like, what's the scale that it
You
gets?
can print at any scale. So the machine we have is 9 by 9 by 9. So you can't go bigger than 9 inches. So we'll just print sections. Sometimes we'll have to join them together if it's
Mm,
1-to-1 scale, or we print miniatures just to get an understanding of the overall look and feel,
Mhm.
and then see how they sit together. Because again, it's a 9-piece collection, and we want everything to feel good and cohesive. We understand that not everyone is going to buy every piece, but maybe we have a fan or two that would love to buy all 9 pieces.
I will buy all 9 miniatures.
yeah.
I don't know if that's pro
We can buy it
forma
one
or.
piece at a time.
You also talked about how a lot of your materials, you want to sort of be socially conscious about the materials, the fabric,
Mm.
um, and you had to source those all in Europe, or are they all from all over?
Yeah, I mean, we decided to source everything in Switzerland. A part of that is we went through this rigorous process that took a little bit over 6 months to be certified by the Swiss label, which is recognized. If you go to the grocery store there, it's in Switzerland, it's second nature. There's this label that says Swiss made. If you don't go through their regulations, like you can't legally say that. And so they do random checks, but basically at least, I think it's like 70 or 75% of the material and labor has to be within Switzerland and to be recognized. And the reason for that is that there's just a lot of regulations that the Swiss government has to help ensure quality, which was important for us. And so the lumber is all from, within the area of Switzerland. Our upholstery is actually from Germany, which is not that far from Switzerland. But we chose this particular company because they use wool, and it's in like 98 or 99% wool, and then there's like a 1% something else. And why we chose that is because there's a lot of rules in America around fire retardants, and so often you will get fabric and then have to apply additional chemical treatment to accommodate that. And we didn't want to use toxic materials, so this company makes a really great product and variations in colors and weaves, and so we decided to use that. And yeah, it's important for us to have materials that you feel comfortable bringing to your home, again, not only for longevity just but for health. And again, the pandemic, I think, has made us all reflect a lot about what we bring into our home, and that's just something important to us. And again, no waste. And the last thing I'll say too is our factory, who does all of the woodworking, they're pretty amazing because they use any excess wood and with their cuts, and it goes back into a heating and electrical network within their village, so that there's no waste. So they're very self-sustainable. It's in Schwyz, which is where I guess Switzerland was originally founded. So you drive in there, it's out of a movie where you're just in this valley, and it's very beautiful and quiet, but it's great to know that, we're not adding to waste even in our production, that goes back into, again, function and use. It's not just thrown out.
What's coming up in the next couple months with you guys?
We have exciting news. In September, we will be part of Zurich Design Weeks, which is a citywide design crawl, I guess, where different furniture and design stores and vendors will be having vignettes around the city. So we're joining that, and we will be having our residency at the Monocle Cafe in Zurich.
Congratulations.
That's amazing. That's gonna be
Yes.
fun.
That sounds amazing. And then so it's a week of events.
Yes, it's from the 4th to the 14th. So I think it's more than a week, right? I
Yeah,
can't do math.
it's called Design Weeks, plural, which is a little strange. And
But it's more like 10 days. So
yeah.
like, is it weeks or is it?
And I think, and then hopefully in the fall sometime you'll start doing some more stuff on the New York side of things too, right?
Yeah,
Plan?
we originally were planning to launch during this year's ICFF Design Week in New York, just because we're based in New York. But as everyone knows, things don't go right. Production doesn't happen on time, or tariffs scare you off, and so it kind of worked out because we were in Basel recently networking, which is rare for us because we're not social butterflies. But when we were there, we met a lot of people, and that's sort of how this whole Monocle thing happened. We met the founder during a random radio show that he hosts, and then we met a few other folks of the team at various events during Art Basel, and it really just shows you that if you go out and meet people in your community, they're willing to listen to you and learn more about you. So I think it worked out for us in the end that we're launching with Monocle, because that's sort of where we started back in 2019, which is cool. But yeah, we're still looking to do something in New York just because we're based here. So probably, later in the fall, we're looking to maybe do something in our own space or with the Swiss consulate in New York. But yeah, there's more to come for sure.
That's great. So people can check you out on social and on your website too to see stuff. So that's good.
Yeah.
So one of the things we usually ask before every one of our guests is, what's the best advice you've ever received? And in turn, what advice would you give to somebody else? Do you guys want to split it up?
Yeah. I mean, Rob, which one do you want to take?
I guess maybe received. I have maybe two for that. The first one, which it just lives in my head forever, was I did a program in the Netherlands with a few design studios when I was younger, and the Dutch are very straightforward too. I must have a thing about like I like when people are just straightforward. So Germans with the Dutch, um, but this guy Bob Van Dyke, who runs a studio, and he was running the program. He essentially kind of yelled at me because I was thinking too much about what to do, and he was like, "Stop thinking, just do." And you learn through the process, and you'll probably have a different outcome than if you were trying to control it the entire time. And that has been very life changing for me, maybe because I always overthought everything, thanks to my parents who like to do that, and it's passed down. But I think that's been really helpful for me, and through my career of just realizing that once you start doing things, you learn, you realize that things don't work or they do work, and it really just helps shape the end result through the process. So I think that's something I'll never forget.
I think a piece of advice I would give someone, especially if you're interested in doing this, is don't be afraid to recognize when something isn't working. And then on top of that, don't be afraid to ask for help or ask your network, because most of the time you're always going to have either someone in common or know someone through a friend who has an answer, possibly. And it's really great, one, to either make a connection and find people that are similar to you, but also to get help with sometimes answers that you can't Google.
My other advice would be, or this is my advice, which is going to sound silly, but I do think investing in creative is really important. And I know we're all creative here, and that's kind of talking in an echo chamber, but I think where we got to today is because of our creative. And I don't mean the physical products, but investing in photography and stylists. Like, people don't think they need a stylist. They need a stylist. Like, styling, I have the most respect for because they make things look effortlessly real. Whereas I am such a like particular person. If I try to style something, it's gonna look like a computer did it. But people recognize that. We've gone to so many talks too, and we hear the same thing of press or magazines or anyone or even consumers won't look at something if it doesn't have great creative or imagery. And so I think that's really helped shape us as a brand and how we show up, but also you can see that we invest in that, and maybe also selfishly because we've both been in that world of doing it for other people, and we know how much that takes to do, and it's not cheap. It's a lot of work, but I think when you see companies that do invest in the creative, it always sets them apart because you can see that there's a vision there, and I think that vision's important, not giving up, because otherwise you'll be like everyone else in the market if you don't have that vision.
That's really good.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. So should we take a little break and then we'll come back and do what's inspiring us this week or lately?
Sure.
Okay. So Mel, what's inspiring you this week?
A Filipino fabric called pina. It's made from a pineapple leaf. About a year ago, I needed to go to a wedding, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to wear a traditional Filipino shirt called a barong. And then when you start looking at this, it's very traditional. It's very formal wear, and it's what's the quality of it is that it's a pineapple leaf, and the fibers are taken and it's woven, and it's very distinct in the fact that it's transparent but very stiff, and it's usually generally for clothing. It's been around since the 17th century. Spanish colonialists brought it to the Philippines. Actually, the pineapple they brought, and this fabric was starting to be made. And I wanted to explore actually it in homewares because I think it's an amazing material for sheer curtains or Roman blinds. So this week I'm going back to my roots, I guess, and I think Pina. And you,
That's
Marcy, what's
cool.
inspiring you this week?
Well, I'm forever thinking about reconfiguring my studio and trying to work things out. And I want to have a space that's like a dust free zone. So I'm getting inspired by interior windows in general, just looking at different places where, like Downton Abbey style, like scullery type thing with interiors that have windows on the inside, looking at so that I can create a space that will be dust free that will also have light. So interior windows for me. So that brings me back to my like English house tour type stuff. And you guys, how about you guys?
I'll stay in Switzerland just to be on theme, but
Round it all
we we recently just came back from Basel, and we were staying with our friends there, who actually was our stylist for our most recent shoot. They split time between Basel and Berlin, but because of her, we got to experience Art Basel, which I never had done before. And she took us to this not official Art Basel thing, but it's called Basel Social Club. And they change their venue every year. And this year it was in this old, I don't even know if you call it a townhouse. It was huge. It was like
It was like a mansion.
it was like combined townhouses, and you would walk through and there was art in every room, like even the attic. And while the art was cool, I of course was much more interested in the home. And so we all were, actually. So we were all exploring. We got lost. It was just, there was so many rooms, but it was so cool to go through an old home and just see, you could kind of see when the renovations happened and the style was different. And it was just so, it reminds me of why I love traveling. And when I went with Mel and Marcy, you guys, to Belgium, and we went to Axel Vervoort's castle, I'll never forget that. But I get so inspired just by seeing old homes, and just how they were designed, the woodworking, the windows, Marcy, and the hardware, and it's just always so inspiring for me. And so I've been still thinking about that weeks later, of just how cool that was.
Is that something people could go visit, or was it just up for the event?
It was just for the event, and they changed their venue every year, but it was very cool.
That's cool. How about you, Kev?
So I guess Rob sort of took my answer, but for a different reason. So I've been inspired by history, which it sounds very vague, but let me explain. So most recently, our air conditioner broke, and while we've been waiting for it to get fixed, I've been researching like how people in olden times stayed cool, because as if you're in New York, there's been a really hot heat wave, and it's really inspiring to see and try and understand how people have been dealing with the same problems over the centuries, and how they were using technology and just the wind to cool down their homes. And I think there's a really great opportunity to explore that and find new ways of incorporating things that people have already tried to problem solve. Instead of trying to create something brand new, someone's tried to do it. And
Okay,
I think you can learn from that.
I am picturing a huge cube, a block of ice, and a fan in your apartment.
No, I know what you're talking about, Kevin, because I think it's that whole idea where people would always face a house a certain way so that it didn't get the full day. So
Yeah.
like, they would actually
Yeah.
build with the thought of how to kind of maximize like the heat and cooling and all that sort of stuff. And I do think it is an interesting thing to look at, because now we don't even think about it because we just throw HVAC into it. But maybe there is like
Yeah.
a sensitivity.
Or materials, right? Like like there's certain materials that absorb heat during the day,
Right.
and then it's cooler at night. And there's a lot of those basic foundations that you quickly forget because of either money, or you just want to sell something new.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it is interesting.
Well, this has been a fantastic episode. Thank you both for joining us today, and good luck
Thank you.
with it all. And
No, I was just going to say, we're just excited for the next couple months to kind of see a bit more of what you guys have been working on. And when you start to put that out in the world, I think it's going to be really exciting for people.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This was
Yeah.
really fun.
Come to Zurich. Marcy's coming.
I'm coming. If you want to learn more about Seitz and Rob and Kevin, be sure to check out the show notes as well as our website, www.alifecreativepod.com.
our producer is Chris Kangas. Our theme music was composed by Pierce McIntyre, and a special thanks to all the amazing people at East 10th House Studio.